April 23rd, 1945, 14:20 hours. Outside Bremen, Germany, covering each other, expecting the usual. A firefight until the Germans either surrendered or died fighting. But when his lead section burst through the schoolhouse door, weapons ready, what they found stopped them completely. 12 German soldiers sat against the wall, hands raised, rifles discarded. But they weren't soldiers. They were boys. The oldest might have been 16. Several looked 13 or enemy combatants. They were children who'd been handed guns and told to fight professional soldiers. The propaganda had warned them about British brutality, about torture and execution, about fates worse than death. Morrison holstered his pistol and spoke to his corporal. "Get them out of here. Hot tea, rations, medical check, and find a German speaker. We need to tell them this." In practice, as Germany's situation deteriorated, the age restrictions were ignored completely. Boys as young as 12 found themselves drafted, handed obsolete rifles or Panzerfausts, given minimal training and sent to defensive positions against professional Allied armies. The numbers documented desperation. Actual combat deployment reached approximately 1.5 million, including an estimated 100 to 150,000 teenagers between ages 12 and 17. Most received 1 to 2 weeks of training, sometimes only days. Equipment was whatever could be found: captured Soviet rifles, obsolete German weapons, Panzerfausts, effective against tanks, but requiring suicidal approach distances. The indoctrination these children received had been systematic since childhood. Hitler Youth had taught military skills and Nazi ideology from age 10 onward. By the time boys were conscripted into Volkssturm, they'd spent years being conditioned to believe dying for the Führer was glorious, that retreat was cowardice, that surrender meant dishonor worse than death. They genuinely believed Allied soldiers, particularly British, would torture and execute prisoners. The reality of combat shattered these beliefs within hours. Volkssturm units were thrown against Allied forces with minimal support, inadequate weapons, and no realistic hope of success. They faced professional soldiers who'd fought across Europe for years, supported by overwhelming artillery and air power. The casualties were catastrophic. Medical attention for the injured ones, then send them back with next supply convoy. His men responded without hesitation, opening ration packs, brewing tea, finding blankets, treating scratches and bruises that would have been ignored for adult prisoners. The boys' reaction was complete confusion. They'd expected execution or torture. Instead, they received hot tea and British Army biscuits. A corporal who spoke German explained they were prisoners of war, would be treated according to Geneva Conventions, would receive food and shelter, would eventually be repatriated to families. The explanation seemed impossible. British soldiers being decent to German enemies contradicted every propaganda message they'd absorbed. Similar scenes repeated across British sectors. The Somerset Light Infantry captured 37 German teenagers defending a bridge near Minden. The Royal Scots captured 21 boys in a village north of Hanover. The Durham Light Infantry found an entire Volkssturm company, 83 men and boys, average age perhaps 15, who'd been abandoned by their officers and were starving in a forest. In each case, British response followed similar pattern: immediate medical attention for wounded, food and water, reassurance through whatever German speakers were available that they wouldn't be harmed, treatment that acknowledged they were children caught in circumstances beyond their control rather than ideological enemies deserving harsh treatment. Some attempted suicide, putting rifle barrels in mouths, pulling pins on grenades. British soldiers often had to physically prevent these attempts, wresting weapons away from children trying to kill themselves because they believed death was preferable to British administrators recognized that child prisoners required different handling than adults. Informal accommodations emerged, extra rations for growing boys, educational programs, separation of youngest prisoners from hardcore Nazis who might continue indoctrination. Mental health needs were addressed through camp chaplains and medical officers who recognized that child soldiers were dealing with trauma beyond normal POW experience, often included emotional support that boys desperately needed. Many child soldiers were dealing with trauma from combat, grief from family losses, and psychological damage from years of indoctrination and violence. British soldiers who'd seen enough combat to understand trauma sometimes became informal counselors, listening to boys describe experiences they couldn't process alone. The Education Initiative British authorities recognized that child soldiers needed education as much as incarceration. Many had received minimal schooling after age 12. The Educational Initiative served multiple purposes. It kept prisoners productively occupied, reducing discipline problems that came from boredom. It prepared them for post-war life, increasing likelihood they'd become productive citizens rather than embittered veterans. Christmas of 1945. December 1945 brought first Christmas of peace, though many German prisoners remained in British camps awaiting repatriation. Camp authorities permitted prisoners to organize Christmas celebrations, decorating barracks, organizing religious services, preparing special meals within rationing constraints. British guards contributed to celebrations, donating cigarettes, chocolates, and small gifts purchased with their own money. At Camp 186, the youngest prisoners, boys who'd been captured between ages 13 and 16, organized Christmas service in camp chapel, music that transcended nationality and war. British guards standing watch outside stopped to listen, many remembering their own sons or younger brothers, wondering how any civilized nation could send children to fight and die. After the service, Camp Commandant made brief speech through interpreter. He acknowledged the boys had fought bravely, misguided perhaps, but courage deserved recognition. He noted that war was over, that they'd survived when many hadn't, that they should take pride in survival and use the opportunity to build better lives and better Germany. He concluded by wishing them peaceful Christmas and promising repatriation would proceed as quickly as logistics allowed. British willingness to share scarce resources with former enemies during important holiday. Some boys wept quietly during the meal. Others laughed and talked with animation that had been absent during their first months of captivity. The atmosphere was simultaneously melancholy. They were far from homes that might no longer exist, and hopeful, recognizing they'd survived and had futures worth pursuing. The closing. The story of German child soldiers and British treatment is ultimately about choices made when cruelty would have been justified. British soldiers who captured terrified German teenagers could have responded harshly. These boys had fought for Nazi regime, had shot at British forces, represented enemy that had killed British soldiers and bombed British cities. Revenge would have been understandable. Rough treatment would have been legally permissible. No one would have criticized British forces for showing less mercy. But British chose differently. They saw children who'd been armed and indoctrinated, but were still children. They prevented suicides when boys tried to kill themselves rather than face expected torture. They provided food, shelter, medical care, education. They maintained civilized standards even when dealing with defeated enemies who'd fought for explicitly barbaric regime. That choice had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate humanitarian benefit. The boys who received mercy carried those memories throughout their lives. They taught their children and grandchildren that British forces had chosen humanity over hatred. They became advocates for democracy and reconciliation. They helped build post-war Germany into stable partner rather than embittered enemy nursing grievances. The field where British soldiers found 12 terrified boys expecting execution became symbol of something essential about how wars should end. Not with vengeance that perpetuates hatred, but with mercy that enables transformation. Not by punishing children for adults' crimes, but by giving them opportunities to build better lives and better nation. German child soldiers expected no mercy. British gave them something better: fair treatment that acknowledged their humanity, education that prepared them for peace, and examples of civilization that propaganda had claimed didn't exist. Those gifts shaped thousands of lives and helped create post-war world where former enemies could become friends. That remains the story's lasting lesson: that mercy is strategic as well as moral, that treating defeated enemies decently creates better outcomes than revenge, and that maintaining humanity even in war's worst moments defines what civilization actually means.
Nagyon, itt meg is a gefallen. Milyen fegyvertek mutatkozáltak?
Semmilyen.
Die hat nichts, keine, dennoch. Nur die Offiziere Pistole, aber die gehört nichts.
Also, ich kann jetzt den Befehl geben, weiterzumarschieren.
És az a parancshoz vigyázz, és tovább.
Önnek szállat! Ön tudám! Szállat! Itt!
Sergeant, will you ask this man what nationality he is?
Sure. Welche Staatsangehörigkeit haben Sie?
Im Ungarn.
He's a Hungarian.
A Hungarian. Will you ask you what outfit or what organization he belongs to?
Sure. Welche Einheit haben Sie angehört?
Im Kösel.
Ja, was war das? Eine Schule da?
Königliche Ungarische Unterrealschule.
That was the Royal Hungarian High School.
High school.
Hey.
Sergeant, will you ask this man how much military training he's had?
Sure. Was für Ausbildung haben Sie bekommen?
Rechtsum, linksum und marschieren.
Kein Waffen.
Nicht.
He just received training in close order drill. He didn't have any training with weapons at all.
No training with weapons.
That's right.
How long has this young man been in the military service?
Seit wie lange sind Sie schon in der Schule?
4 Jahre.
He's been there for 4 years.
And for 4 years.
That's right.
Has this young man ever had any combat with American troops?
Haben Sie gegen amerikanische Truppen gekämpft?
Nicht.
He says no, emphatically.
No. What's the age of this young man?
Wie alt sind Sie?
14.
He's 14 years old.
He's 14 years old and has been in the Army for 4 years. Entered the Army when he was 10.
That's right.
Well, Sergeant, I guess that's about all the information we need off this young man, so let's turn him back into the PW cage and let him go.
Okay. Also, jetzt können Sie weggehen. Sie können da zurückgehen. Das wird alles sein.
Ja. Hey. Woher?
Sergeant, will you ask this young soldier here what nationality he is?
Was sind Sie, Deutsch?
Nix.
Was sind
Ungarische.
Sie? He's a Hungarian.
You're Hungarian.
That's right.
Find out what organization he belongs to, what military organization.
Welche Einheit waren Sie? Was waren
Wir
Sie?
kommen von Kösek.
Ja, was waren Sie? In der Schule?
Schule, ja.
He was in an Hungarian military school.
Hungarian military school. How about the military training of this young man, Sergeant?
Was für Ausbildung haben Sie bekommen?
Mein Haupttag
Ja, und was noch?
und dieser und
Haben Sie Waffen gehabt?
was?
Waffen, fegyvert.
Nix. So nix.
Well, we just had close order drill, but they never had any training with weapons.
No training with weapons. How long has this youngster been in the service?
Wie lange sind Sie schon in der Schule?
Die Schule?
Ja. Hanje Evre.
Han Ivra Nij. Nij.
4 Jahre.
4 Jahre.
Schon 4 Jahre in der Schule?
Ich bin dritte Klasse.
Ja. He's been in already for 2 years. He's in his 3rd year now.
3rd year.
Cut.
Has this youngster ever had any combat or been around combat with American troops?
Haben Sie gegen amerikanische Truppen schon gekämpft?
Was?
Haben Sie gegen Amerikaner gekämpft? Gekämpft?
Gekämpft?
Ja, gegen Amerikaner. Haben Sie geschossen gegen Amerikaner? Geschossen. So.
Nix, wir nix schossen.
Oh, they says they never fired a shot.
Never fired a shot. What's the age of this boy?
Wie alt sind Sie?
12.
He's 12 years old.
12 years of age, and he's had 3 years of military training. Well, Sergeant, I think we've finished with this young man. We'll put him back to PWK with the other youngsters back there.
Also, das ist alles. Jetzt können Sie weg.
Alles?
Ja.
Alles ist 10, 11, 12, 13.